Hello, my name is Taylor. I am a financial coach and I love helping couples create cash flow systems when they have separate accounts to make their lives a million times easier when managing money. So I'd love to go through how to do this in Monarch Money, but also the account structure that you'll need to, again, make your life easier. If you're Venmoing each other back and forth, if there's constant transfers going back and forth, if you're having a hard time figuring out the split on who's paying for what, these are all things that can be made easier if you're using the right account structure, but they're also big decisions you have to make separately from this video, and we might go into that in future videos, but those decisions do need to be made, and I hope that this video helps you determine what is the right structure, split, and method for you going forward. So let's dive into it. First off, inside Monarch Money, you really need to make sure your categories are set up to best serve you. So there are 3 ways I'm going to go through on how couples can maintain separate accounts but still budget together. This first way is going to be completely separate accounts, meaning there is no joint account, there is no joint credit card. It is just maybe someone's taken over some bills and someone's taken over others, and maybe you're Venmoing each other back and forth. If that's the case, then that's this first scenario I'm going to show you. The second scenario is a partially joint situation where you have a joint account but you still maintain separate accounts. And then the third one is just a more streamlined approach to the second one. It's still partially, or it's more fully joined, but you still have separation. You still have your individual accounts so that you can have personal spending and goals separate from your household. So let's dive into it and show you what that account setup would look like. So separate accounts. This is the first scenario. You have completely separate accounts. So this is really mostly for people who are still really new in the relationship. You haven't quite decided to commit to joining finances. Maybe you just moved in. Maybe you're working on towards marriage. Maybe you're working toward buying a house together, but you're still in that new phase. And so you haven't really wanted to commit to opening up a joint account yet. That is totally fine. It's a really cool thing that you're doing, is getting started with Monarch Money so that you can still have total transparency of your finances as you prepare to build your financial life together. So a super awesome way to get started. So first off, the thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that your budget and your categories actually are separated as well. We want to have your categories kind of reflect the bills that you're paying in your separate accounts. So for example, we create 2 groups, maybe John and Melanie as your 2 groups. And these might be the only 2 groups you have. You might delete all the other groups, especially if it is completely separate. This might be it for you. But it's up to you as far as if you want to create any other more joined groups. But usually for separate accounts, you have 2 groups. And again, you click on create group right here in order to make that group. Now, this is where you'll decide who's paying for what and what's going into what categories you need in each other's groups. So let's say, for example, John is paying for all utilities and Melanie's maybe paying for the mortgage. So you maybe find the default categories that Monarch already has and maybe just drag and drop them into the whoever's actually paying for them. So maybe you both have a phone, right? So you might have to rename this to Melanie's phone or rename it to either one. Melanie's phone, of course, spell it correctly. And then you'll create a category for John's phone, of course, because John needs his own phone bill to be coming out of Monarch as well. And so you both have your own, categories that are relevant to you. But again, you're still going to keep working on that split. Maybe John's paying for utilities again, and maybe, let's see, where did the mortgage go? Melanie's paying for mortgage. Maybe Melanie has her own insurance. Maybe Melanie has a student loan, but John's paying for the HOA. Maybe Melanie took over the water bill, and you can get the idea. Here's where we're trying to figure out who's paying for who. And what out of each of your individual accounts. Now, it doesn't stop at the bills, right? It's also going to need to be for shopping expenses. So, you'll have to create a category for Melanie's groceries and John's groceries, Melanie's shopping and John's shopping, and you can get the idea from there. The point is to build this fully out so you both have your own budget to work with inside Monarch Money, so that when you go into your budget, and you have your paycheck set up. So maybe John's paycheck's $5,000, Melanie's $8,400. You can go ahead and assign all of John's expenses up to the point of his paycheck. So maybe, keep assigning money until eventually you get to his paycheck with just $5,000. Of course, if you have more categories here, it'll equal to make sure his budget is equal to $5,000 because he's going to spend all of his income, or we assume. You might want to create a category for John's savings, John's shopping, again, all of those categories. Same with Melanie's. You'll set up Melanie's budget so that her budget total would equal her income. So that's the way you would budget for completely separate accounts. You really need to just make sure your categories are set up in a way to reflect your separate accounts and what you both are paying for. So let's go on to the second scenario, another common scenario with categories where you have a joint account, but you have separate, but your paychecks are going into your separate accounts. Your paychecks are going into separate accounts and you send money to the joint account every month to pay for joint expenses. You're going to need to set up your categories in the exact same way, kind of a group for each separate account plus your new joint account. So in this case, maybe we're going to rename this fixed expenses or move it down to household joint. Maybe now the household joint account is going to handle groceries, restaurants, and snacks. And of course, you might have your own personal restaurants and snacks and all that stuff, but your household joint is is intending to pay for these things. Now, this comes down to discipline on how you use your accounts. If you open up a household joint and you're still using it to buy your own stuff on Amazon, like your personal expenses, well, then you're not using your joint account correctly. You need to keep these accounts sacred and for what its purpose is. So again, if you open a joint account, only use it for joint expenses. Do not swipe the card on personal expenses, and vice versa. Do not use your own personal funds to buy household goods. Use the household funds. And so you're going to set up your household joints to reflect the joint expenses. So maybe you're changing this to household joint fixed expenses. And now you're going to make sure that all your bills are now being funded out of the joint account. So of course, going through, and you can decide what's going to stay joint and what's going to be personal. Maybe you guys want to keep your own insurance policies as personal, and you just really want purely joint expenses to stay where they are. So like this is a joint expense, this is a joint expense, and so on and so forth. So now you have this ability to make sure that you're budgeting correctly for what's going to go in the household. So if you're going to co-create your budget and you're saying, hey, out of our household budget, we have $2,933 of expenses. We have household food, household bills, $2,933 of household expenses. This will help you determine how much you're spending and sending to the joint account. So if, again, that's the dollar amount, if you're going to go 50-50, then you're both are going to send about $1,500 to the joint account. That is your 50-50 split. Now, if you want to do a different kind of split, maybe based on a percentage of income or whatever you decide, this will help you determine the number and the dollar amount as you set up your own joint budget. And of course, making sure that you'll have enough for your personal expenses that you want to keep personal. A cool thing that you can do when you set up your categories correctly in the reports section in Monarch is you can run a report to make sure that, hey, maybe you want to see of the joint expenses, what went on John's credit card versus Melanie's credit card of our joint household expenses. Now, of course, if you're using a joint account, this is taken care of in the joint, but maybe you're not using the accounts correctly and you keep accidentally swiping your own card and you might need a true up at the end of the month. You can run a filtered report on per account. So you can run it by John's credit card, Melanie's credit card, and the categories you want to look at, see how much they've spent in those categories, and it'll help you figure out if you are using your accounts correctly, if you are owing each other money. These reports are really, really helpful. So let's go on to the third scenario. Now, the third scenario is my best scenario, the best scenario you can come up with if you are a household that is fully wanting to commit to each other, meaning you have a house, you have kids, you have a long-term projection of your relationship, you have you're growing for stability, you are committed to each other, it's a committed partnership. This is the way I would recommend having separate accounts, but making your life a million times easier. So this is an example of the phase one joint, right? You open a joint checking account, but your income, these little money bags, are going into your personal account, and then you're sending your contribution, whether it's 50, 50, 80, 20, you both are sending an amount of contribution into the joint account. But what I'd recommend is when you're, in a committed relationship and you're ready to make your life a little bit easier, I'd actually recommend this method. You actually have your income automatically deposited into the joint account. You have this because now you're only going to send a set amount of personal funds to each other's personal accounts, and these personal accounts should only be used for personal funds. In fact, these accounts don't even have to be connected to Monarch. In fact, you can just keep these separate. These are your own thing. You can do whatever, no questions asked. Partner doesn't care because you have agreed to send each other a set amount. Now, I really recommend to make it an equal amount. No matter what your income is, partner one, partner two, making more or less, each person for an equitable split should be getting their own dollar amount, and it should be a same dollar amount. Now, that does not have to be the case for everyone. Some people, it makes sense to do, a little bit more in some personal account versus the other. Totally up to you on how you want to split that. A perfect example of this is that when we were divvying up in my relationship, when we were divvying up our personal funds, I actually really wanted to spend it more on travel than on things. I like travel more than buying things, and so my personal funds actually stay in the joint account. So we have a joint because we have a joint savings account for travel. So I get a little less here. He gets his same amount. At the end of the day, it's the same amount. I just don't send as much out here, but I keep it in our joint savings for our joint travel. And that's one of these examples where it might not be a completely equal split, and that's totally okay. It just needs to be a conversation between you guys. But I do recommend usually is to have the same amount. So if one person's getting $500, the other person is also getting $500 sent to their personal account. This is going to make your budgeting life so much easier. One, it's that everything you guys are a team. You're on the same page. You need to send money into your joint savings. Your household goals is household funds, but you can maintain that independence and build your own funds for your own personal goals, especially if your goals don't quite align. It's a really good thing to have those separate accounts. So this is the way I would recommend setting up your account structure. When you do that, this is what it'll look like in Monarch Money. So instead of having a whole bunch of expenses for each of your personal expenses or a whole bunch of categories for each of your personal expenses, you're going to have one category saying John's personal funds or Melanie's personal funds, and you're going to categorize the transaction of money that's sent to the personal accounts. So if you send $500 to each person, that transfer of $500 is going to go here. That means that Melanie and John can now do whatever they want with that $500. It's in the budget. It's been recognized as an expense. Now they can do whatever they want with their money. No questions asked. It's not part of the budget. They can do whatever they want. It's their choice and their freedom there. The rest of the household is going to be for your household expenses. You have all your fixed expenses. You have your household groceries, restaurants, entertainment, clothes. These are all things that you have decided should be household items, especially for kids' expenses, child's care, and of course your household goals, gifting to friends and family, holidays, travel, charity. Like these become household expenses because you guys are a team and you're working toward your household financial success. So that is the way I would recommend setting up split accounts. One being fully split, second being partially split, and then full being even less partially split in the sense that it's only split for personal funds. Everything else is in the household and ready to be spent. So please let me know if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, concerns about the way you're setting up your categories. I'd love to chat with you. We have workshops almost every week where you can jump on a live Q&A call and we can have a discussion, microphone, camera on. We're talking and discussing the different scenarios that you could use in Monarch Money, as well as account structure outside of Monarch to maintain your perfect household cash flow system. Let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for subscribing, and thank you so much.